Hello, friends. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Motley, and today let's talk about brain health, memory problems, and its association with a blood parasite known as Babesia. Now, many of us out there have memory issues, short-term memory recall, fuzzy mind, fuzzy brain, a foggy brain, inability to see clearly because my eyes feel so cloudy, sharp lightning twinges in my cranium, even stuffy ears or problems hearing, tinnitus, random headaches at the back of the neck where your cranium meets your neck, even tight jaws. Now, we often see this as happenstance. This is just me getting older. But if this is happening to you, I want you to investigate an infection known as Babesia. They are blood parasites that can make their way through the blood-brain barrier and into the tissues of the brain and create toxicities and injure brain tissue. Just by their presence, they can create such high inflammation that it can actually damage your brain tissue, which is not allowing your brain to do what it is supposed to do by firing signals. Have you ever had times where you want to think a thought and the memory starts to actually take place in your head and you feel like, I just need to try to finish this thought, but you can't totally get to the end point? That is a problem where your nerve transmission is actually slowed down. Your brain is shooting signals, trillions of signals every second. And the fat in our brains are basically helping us shoot those signals quickly. If anything comes into the brain and disrupts the fat content of the brain, injures that insulation, remember, if this occurs, it decreases your ability to think a thought. I will say this. I had Lyme's disease and I had Babesia very badly, along with Bartonella. And one of the things I found was the hardest was that, again, I would think a thought, I would start talking, and it felt like there was some form or pressure in my head, literally like somebody was putting pressure down in the middle of my cranium, pressing down. And it was almost where the words were not allowed to come out of my mouth. I felt that my eyes would almost feel like they're stuck in a certain position. And if I kept my eyes in a particular position, they would get stuck and my head would start to ache. I then started to see very big twinges around my ears and these lightning type sharp pains that would stab me in the middle of the brain. And I remember as this was happening, I was watching a lecture by Dr. Daniel Amen, who does his brain clinics in certain cities around the country. And he was showing the brain maps of those people that had Alzheimer's and dementia and even Lyme's disease. And he was showing that they had different types of holes or basically areas of their brain that had actually been eaten away or deteriorated by the infection. This got me investigating even further when I found out I had Lyme disease and infections. Like, what about Lyme disease would injure my brain so badly that would get my words stuck in my head? And the thing that topped it off was I started having flashing lights in my eyes. When I started to rotate my eyes just to look from paper to computer, I would see these big flashes and it really scared me. When this happened, I realized that the motor function, the ability to move, my left side being weaker than my right, getting me MS symptoms was happening in my brain. So if you're out there listening and you think, man, my words get stuck. I have memory problems. I can't even remember the gentleman's name I talked to at the grocery store 5 seconds ago. If somebody tells me to go in and go get me something in the next room and I go in, I forget what they asked me to get. If this happens to you, please don't just dismiss it as a bad memory, as getting older. Your brain is supposed to function optimally if you feed it the right nutrients, but if there is infections in the brain, it's going to deteriorate those nerve signals and you're not going to have a fast memory. So when you go through life and you thought, man, when I was young, I was able to do all of these things. I was able to remember phone numbers and remember names. I was able to get in my car and drive to a location and not even have to think about it. But now there are times when I'm driving and I actually forget where I am, where I'm going. Did I go around this corner? What am I doing right here? Oh, that's the beginning of dementia. That's the beginning of Alzheimer's. And I know many of my patients have Alzheimer's and dementia, and it's hard. But almost all of those patients have had tests that have proven that they've had Babesia and Lyme disease. Now, Babesia is a co-infection of Lyme disease. The infections like Bartonella, Borrelia, Epstein-Barr virus, Mycoplasma, Anaplasma, Ehrlichia. These are just forms of infections that gets into a tick and is transferred through a bite. Now, Babesia has been known to even go through blood transfusions. But when you get to the human, when the tick gets to the human, that's the end of the road. There's no real other transfer of this infection unless it's through human contact or saliva, which has been shown, or even through some placental research shows that it goes across placenta. But it can go through blood transfusions. But the biggest point is that if you get bit by a tick that has any type of Lyme disease, the infection is a sporozoite. So what happens with the sporozoite is that when it gets into the body, it actually will multiply by budding. So what that means is it finds your red blood cells and gets into the red blood cells and starts to bud, starts to multiply, start to feed on the proteins in your red blood cells known as hemoglobin. Hemoglobin attaches to iron and iron attaches to oxygen. And then if you can't attach to oxygen because these infections are multiplying, eventually filling your red blood cells so full that they pop open, you start to get anemia. In the area where the tick bit you will have rashes because the blood that's spilling out of these red blood cells are now creating pigment in your skin. Have you ever heard of bull's eye rash or Rocky Mountain spotted fever? If you have ever had any type of rash after a bug bite, you have to suspect any form of Lyme co-infections. Ehrlichiosis, Babesiosis, Bartonella, Borrelia. Borrelia has a spirochete shape, like a corkscrew. Babesia is a small sporozoite, which is like round little balls. And you can see your red blood cells, and they're very small. And they get into your red blood cells, and they'll multiply. Now, the crazy thing is that as it multiplies, you can see it on a slide, on a microscope slide. And its shape makes it very, very hard to capture, in a sense, because they're so small, and they're so small compared to a red blood cell, that they can fit in between cells very easily. They can get into your tissue. They love to get into the red blood cells because the red blood cells are going everywhere. So they don't have a very strong cell wall, but they're very, very small. And that is why it makes it so hard to get rid of very quickly, because they multiply so quickly. They're very small. They hide within your red blood cells, and they can multiply quickly. But because they're so small and they can get into your red blood cells, it allows them to go through the body in your vascular system. And when it gets up into your brain, it can bypass your brain, blood-brain barrier. Say that 3 times fast. Sorry, guys. But it can make its way past your blood-brain barrier and make its way to settle into tissue. And so if it pops open a red blood cell that's in your brain, it can migrate to other red blood cells. It starts to create more toxicities. You'll see higher inflammation because the immune cells in your brain are trying to go attack them because there's an intruder here. So you have the infections just roaming around the brain, infecting other red blood cells, and you start seeing higher toxicity from the Babesia. And if you have Babesia, you probably have Borrelia, and they are creating infections in the brain, and they're burrowing their way into your brain tissue, and that creates the inflammation. Your own cells are trying to attack these things, creating autoimmune type immune response, and then you start to get higher oxidants. Your body is trying to use oxygen species like superoxide dismutase, hydrogen peroxide, to kill off the infection. And so you start to get inflamed. And then you start to have memory loss. You start to feel like you have a hot head, like a fever. And you're like, man, I'm getting random fevers. I'm getting random sharp pains. I'm getting such bad oxygen infusion in my brain where I actually feel like my brain is starving for oxygen. I have to breathe in more and get more air. It's almost like I'm hungry for air. If this is happening, don't be discouraged. Listen to this podcast and please go find a Babesia type test. Now, I like to use a few simple tests. Vibrant Wellness Labs has a good test. Also, DNA Connections with an X. Now, that's a good lab too. CONNEXIONS. DNAconnections.com, vibrantwellness.com. Now, there are different forms of tick-borne tests, but these two have tick-borne tests that cover a general gambit. When you go to get a test for Lyme disease, if you go to a normal lab, LabCorp or Quest, they're great labs, don't get me wrong, but they're only going to test for a few species of spirochetes or Borrelia. They're hardly going to test for Babesia. There's Babesia microti is one of the biggest ones they have, species of Babesia. But, well, some people pronounce it Babesia. So, sorry. Got to get my pronunciation a bit better. But you only got to test for a few of the strands. So what they're doing is taking the protein codes off these different types of species and putting into this assay, they call it. And so you may be only testing for 10 different species when there's well over hundreds of species of co-infections. There's well over 100 species of Babesia and Borrelia. More are being created every day because of their ability to mutate. So when you go there, they'll say, oh, you're negative, don't worry. And even if you get one strand or one type of Babesia or Borrelia, they say you don't have Lyme disease because it's only one strand. You have to have 5. So what dictates that only 5 strands of Borrelia or Babesia gives you Lyme disease? Oh, there's a magic rule that says if you have less than 5, then you don't have Lyme disease. If you have a high amount of any of these infections, it's a very bad disease. And I count people as having it, even if I see that amount. So you have this stuff going on in your brain. It's inflamed. You got an inflammatory response. You can start to get autoimmune type symptoms. Then the brain starts to get injured. And that's why you start to have the memory lapse. Have you ever had an issue, if you're listening, that you got bit by a tick or a mosquito, and right after that, your memory went bad? Some people I've known have literally got bit by ticks and they've had Alzheimer and dementia symptoms so badly because of the inflammatory response of the infection in their head. Lymph nodes get swollen up, ears get tired, can't hear very well. There's a little muffled sound in their ears. They get a tight jaw. All that because this blood parasite makes its way into the body. And you know what other blood parasite does that as well? Malaria. Plasmodium. Plasmodium malaria or vivax. And it does the same type of injury as Babesia. It's transferred through mosquitoes. So can you go to Africa or the United States or South America, anywhere, and get malaria? Yes, you can. And so you start to see that there are these blood parasites that are infiltrating your body and destroying your red blood cells. And you know what the outcome is? You start to see that your spleen gets swollen. Your spleen helps recycle and break down old red blood cells fragments to help it replenish into the liver to make more bile, the liquid that helps you detoxify and break down fats. And you start to see that the spleen can get swollen. You start to get anemia. You start to feel this pressure up under your diaphragm. You can't breathe that well. And if you go to the doctor, they could say your spleen's okay, but then you start to look at your white blood cell count. You start to look at your white blood cells like neutrophils, eosinophils, and some of them could be imbalanced. Your spleen also helps you to mature white blood cells. So if it's injured from the issues with Babesia rolling around, it could lead to red blood cell and white blood cell count problems. So if this is happening to you, go to the Vibrant Wellness or DNA Connections, and even if they don't say you have Babesia, check and see if you have any of the other type of parasites from Lyme disease. Bartonella, Borrelia, Ehrlichia, Rickettsia, Epstein-Barr virus, Anaplasma, Mycoplasma. You have to clean this stuff up. The reason why is because wherever they're at, they will rob you of the nutrients. They will destroy your red blood cells, your inability to carry nutrients that are needed for every cell to work. You'll see a decrease in your Krebs cycle, your energy cycle running forward, giving all that energy. And when these infections make your cell energy reduce, they can actually make it run in reverse. Yes, it can happen. And there are toxins that come from a Krebs cycle that run in reverse that are very detrimental to the body. But all I want to say is this: if you see these type of symptoms I just mentioned, and if you find any tick-borne type of infection, don't lose heart, because there's some people say you can never get rid of Lyme disease. That's not the question. The question is finding the infection, cleaning it up, reducing it where I've seen blood work where they couldn't find or detect any more Lyme disease. But continuously cleaning your body. Some people say, well, how long do I have to take this stuff to get rid of it? I guess as long as it takes. They're so smart that they hide in the red blood cells. Their spirochetes Borrelia is so smart it hides in the gray matter and the white matter of the body, the brain, the spinal cord. The mycoplasma of Lyme disease can fit in between cells. What I'm saying is when you start to clean it out, you're going to have to clean it out heavily, and it may take you a couple of years if you've had it for a very long time. If you recently just got it, it may take you shorter. But the fact is, when you start to feel better, never stop investigating. Keep using tinctures and herbals to continuously clean and get it checked every 4 to 6 months. Many people out there with Lyme or any type of Babesia infections are like, how long can this take? But when I had Babesia, it took me 3 years to get to where I didn't have any signals of it. But I know some clinics out there like Causenta, Causenta. Causenta is a really good lab that's out in Arizona. And there's many functional medicine clinics out there that do good work with Lyme disease. And when you start to use the herbals, don't think, oh, I feel a little bit better, I can let go. When you talk about energy cycles, you have to keep working to keep the Krebs cycle going. I would rather live my life having to take some tinctures daily and keeping my body clean from parasites and yeast and mold, and be able to enjoy a piece of pizza once in a while or eat something that may not be the best in our natural health world. But if you keep your body clean, you can enjoy a couple things. Maybe you could have a bowl of ice cream. Maybe you could have that piece of pizza. But all that to say is, I want my body to be clean. I want it to be healthy enough to where my brain is functioning at the highest level as I get older. I've seen people get cleared of Lyme disease, and most people say that you can't get rid of it. There's probably research that could be for it or against it. I have seen blood work where it's not showing up anymore, but I'm always that person, that practitioner that always keeps cleansing. Even if there's no Lyme or any infections, I'm always taking things to check or help me with any parasites that may be roaming around or any yeast that's detrimental to me. It's a continuous ongoing health process. So if you have this, check out the lab test. I love tinctures. I love one of my closest buddies, Dr. Alan Lindsley. He has really good tinctures. They're called the LSF formulas. You can go to Nature's Pharmacy, LLC. You can use that website, and I'll put a code at the bottom of the screen for you to jump on and grab any of the tinctures. Like Formula 1 is for the Lyme disease itself. LSF2, which is the second formula, has a lot to do with parasites. And the third has to do with Babesia. Number 4 is a general, more of a rickettsia type, and Ehrlichia type infection cleanser. And number 5 is a lot to do with Bartonella, the ones that give you the cat scratch fever or the stretch marks on the body. Now, there is also an awesome joint and ligament cream, guys. You got to try it. He's got the components of boron and copper and magnesium. He's got CoQ10 in it. He is such a smart dude. He's an engineer at heart, and he became a doctor. And it's just amazing. When I put it on my left side, on my left shoulder and left hip, I used to have burning in my joint because of all the damage that Lyme disease had done. And I couldn't stand with patients for all day, because that's what I'm at. I'm standing all day with patients right here in this office. And I put that on there, and I've been doing it for 2 to 3 months. And I'm telling you, I have no burning and no pain in my joints. You got to try it out. Check out the link in the show notes. I want you to check out these tinctures, because if you do this, he also has a formula for they call it mitochondrial. If you call up their office, it's a powder. I think they're going to put it in a capsule form soon, but it actually turns on your mitochondria. What turns on your mitochondria? B1, B2, B3, magnesium, vitamin K, vitamin D. There's also certain forms of manganese and molybdenum that are shown to help with this process. And you have to turn on the energy of the cells to help with the cleansing process. So never forget that. Look at mitochondrial, or look at any good mitochondria rebuilding product. Researched Nutritionals, they have a really good ATP 360 formula. They have really good products that help turn on the mitochondria. Look at that product. Look at these products. Look at Dr. Alan Lindsley's information. I'm trying to get him on the podcast more because he has such good knowledge about this case. If you have the brain problems, if you know anybody has dementia, Alzheimer's, any type of memory loss, I'm not saying it caused that. I'm saying you want to make sure you clean the brain out so that they have a better quality of life. So please check out this infection. You can also look into some of my favorite herbals. One of my favorite herbals, or a few of them, for Lyme from Supreme Nutrition is going to be Japanese knotweed. I love Malia, which is neem. Cat's claw, of course, my favorites. Black walnut and Artemisia. Those are some of my top. They help so much, guys. If you look into these, look at supremenutritionproducts.com. Look at their information. It's amazing. Look at Nature's Pharmacy products. It's amazing as well. You start taking this, turn on the mitochondria, find a good holistic practitioner in your area that understands Lyme disease, and keep cleansing, and you keep testing. If you use these products, I'm telling you, you can make a big dent in it. Sometimes you need to have a practitioner like a good acupuncturist or a good kinesiologist, AK, applied kinesiology practitioner, that can test with frequencies if the body is stagnant or not moving junk out of the body. If this is the case, even with the herbs and tinctures, I love laser therapy. I love cold laser therapy. Look at cold laser therapy, whether it's red light or violet light, and find practitioners, or you yourself look into it. And I love this little device. It's called Avant Wellness, the Avant laser. Dr. Rick Amy, AMY, he created this laser, and I use this to help with violet light and red light to help clean out infections and heal and re-energize the cells. Look into that. That's a great process. Red light therapy is awesome for Lyme, but you can't get too hot or make you feel sick. I also love infrared saunas, regular saunas, cold baths for this. I love using lymph therapy, electric lymph therapy. The lymph wands that flush the lymph, because you can get lymph or Babesia so bad up here it can't move. No matter how much you take all the herbs and such, if it's stuck, you have to use a lot of lymph herbals. But if you get that lymph to drain with the static wand, the static electrical wand, you'll see huge improvements. In fact, some people come in and they'll have such bad inflammation around their neck, and that's where all the Babesia is hiding out. That's what I want you guys to see. I don't want this to sound negative. I just think it's such a huge piece because I myself suffered with it. I see many patients come in here every day. I'm here in the office, guys. They are having these head problems, memory problems. And I'm not saying Babesia caused all of it. I'm saying Babesia or even Lyme co-infections can be a heavy piece of it. Never underestimate why you have sudden memory issues or brain issues thinking it's just from old age. It's not. Yes, you can have tendencies genetically to have a weaker brain, but if you can clean the brain, you can help your body with building up energy with different nutrients to give yourself a good fighting chance. I hope this podcast has been informational. Guys, look into different aspects of Lyme disease. There are a lot of controversies around it, but all I'm here to do is to give you some information about any problems we just mentioned and some of the solutions. And I want it to be solution driven. Guys, if you have any more questions, please drop me a comment in the comment section. Please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe. We want this to grow because we want to get more information out there. If you want to get more into the nitty gritty of some of the information, the nerd talk, then you can join my membership. I have a membership that you can have the link on Instagram, and we're going to make that more available. We're going to get this thing moving even stronger in this next year. All right, guys, have a blessed night, blessed day, wherever you're at. Thank you for listening from us here at the Ancient Health Podcast. Until next time, God bless. See you guys.